Have you ever waited years, not for luxury, not for promotion, not even for recognition, but for a single fleeting moment? A moment that stretches no more than a few footsteps, long enough to witness your own flesh and blood ascend a platform and claim a piece of parchment that whispers, "You did it." For retired Marine Staff Sergeant Darnell Hughes, that moment was everything. He didn't seek applause. He didn't crave a microphone. All he wanted was a folding chair, a clear line of sight, and the profound privilege of watching his son Caleb receive his high school diploma in San Bernardino, California. On the morning of the ceremony, Darnell was up before the sun crested the horizon. Old habits, instilled by discipline and duty, were not easily broken. He laid his attire across the bed with meticulous reverence. White gloves, polished shoes that reflected more than just light, a perfectly creased cummerbund, and the Marine Corps dress blues that had not adorned his frame since the day he retired. Today, though, today warranted that uniform. He stood before the mirror, the reflection staring back at him unchanged by time. The fabric still hugged his shoulders like it had been stitched for this very morning. His posture was straight not from vanity, but from 2 decades of service. 20 years woven with silence, sacrifice, and solemn vows. 2 brutal tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, and the unspoken promise to a boy who needed a father more than a decorated warrior. "Damn, I clean up all right," Darnell murmured to himself, brushing non-existent lint from his shoulder. His fingers paused over the medals. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Navy Commendation. Each one fastened not as a display of pride, but as a quiet monument to the ones who never made it back. Medals that bore witness to loss, endurance, and impossible choices. From the kitchen, the familiar scent of burnt toast and overcooked eggs drifted down the hall. Caleb, once again, proving he could engineer anything but a decent breakfast. "Dad, you almost ready?" his son called out. "Ready as I'll ever be," Darnell answered, adjusting his collar with careful hands. When he stepped into the living room, his boots clicked against the hardwood floor like distant echoes from another life. Caleb stood there, tall, awkward, and clad in his cap and gown, tugging nervously at the sleeves. But when he saw his father, fully dressed in blues, his breath caught. "Whoa," Caleb whispered. "You look serious." Darnell allowed a soft chuckle. "It's a serious day." For a heartbeat, they said nothing more. They simply stood in that space, father and son, pride and promise, sharing a silence that was louder than any spoken word. Caleb finally grinned. "You're going to make everybody else look like bums." "That's not the goal," Darnell said, smoothing the edge of his jacket. "I just want to show up as who I am." They drove to Roosevelt High School, where the graduation was being held on the football field. The atmosphere was festive. Families with balloons, strollers, umbrellas, and lawn chairs sprawled across the turf like it was a summer carnival. Some parents wore T-shirts with their kids' faces emblazoned across them. Others wore shorts and flip-flops. One man sported a neon mohawk and a tank top that read, "Game over." But Darnell, he stood apart, not because he intended to, but because integrity refuses to blend in. It walks with quiet dignity and needs no announcement. He found his seat early, 6 rows from the back, not close enough to attract attention, but near enough to witness the moment he had waited for. He sat alone, not because he lacked loved ones, but because solitude did not frighten him. His presence filled the space more completely than any crowd. A few people turned to glance. Some smiled politely. Others stared longer than was appropriate. A woman nudged her husband and whispered something under her breath. The man turned, gave Darnell a tight-lipped smile, then looked away. It had always been like that. Not the uniform, but the man inside it. Darnell fixed his gaze forward. Caleb would be seated with his fellow graduates on the far left of the field. 2nd row, hands folded with practiced composure. He had always carried a kind of quiet discipline. Top 10 in his class, bound for a university in mechanical engineering. Darnell felt it then, a swell of pride so potent it threatened to break the seams of his coat. But before the first name had been called, two men began approaching from the back of the bleachers. They didn't look like ushers or school staff. They moved with directed purpose. Khaki pants, tucked-in polo shirts with Roosevelt event security stitched near the chest. One carried a clipboard. The other wore sunglasses even in the shade. They weren't looking for a seat. They were looking at him. Darnell saw them coming long before they spoke. His posture didn't shift. He didn't rise or turn away. He simply tilted his head slightly, the calm gaze of a man who had endured 1,000 checkpoints, each one asking him to justify his presence. "Excuse me, sir," the clipboard holder said, badge reading G. Langston. "Would you mind stepping aside with us for a moment?" Darnell's brow lifted slightly. "About what?" Langston forced a corporate smile. "There have been a few concerns from guests. Some people are uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable," Darnell echoed, the word foreign in his mouth. The second man stepped in, his voice lowered into that patronizing cadence people use when pretending to be polite. "It's a formal event. We're asking everyone to keep things neutral, low profile." Darnell looked down at his uniform, then back at them. "This is my formal." Langston cleared his throat. "Yes, sir, but the uniform, the medals, it's drawing attention. We want to make sure the focus stays on the graduates." A hollow chuckle escaped Darnell's chest. "Right, because nothing steals the spotlight like a Marine sitting in the back row, saying nothing." The surrounding crowd quieted, murmurs beginning to rise like steam. Heads turned. The atmosphere shifted, thickened, familiar to Darnell. It was the same subtle silence that followed him in airports, grocery aisles, even sanctuaries. The same recalibration in people's eyes when the image they held didn't match the man before them. Langston leaned in, lowering his voice. "Sir, if you could just step outside the gate, we can discuss this in private." "No," Darnell said, voice even but resolute. "I'm not leaving. Sir, we're just trying to keep this smooth, and I'm just trying to watch my son graduate." The second guard stepped back. You could see it in his eyes. This wasn't the response he anticipated. People usually complied, especially when coaxed gently toward obedience. That's how it always worked. Subtle control masked as courtesy. But Darnell was not most people. He had stood unmoved in combat zones, weathered fire and loss. Two school security guards with walkie-talkies weren't going to unseat him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He didn't need to. Authority, when earned in blood and honor, does not require volume. "I served 20 years in the Marines," Darnell said. "I've buried friends. I've stood beside flag-draped coffins. I've waited in silence while a nation moved on. And through all of that, I never once asked anyone to make space for me." His eyes locked on theirs. "I earned it." Langston hesitated. The second guard shifted. Behind Darnell, a woman spoke quietly. "He's just watching the ceremony." "Leave him be." Another voice followed. "Is this really necessary?" Still the guard stood. Still Darnell remained seated. Tension hung in the air, stretched taut. A silence born not of peace but pressure. Then Langston reached for his walkie-talkie. "We might need a supervisor down here," he said, turning his back. Darnell exhaled, eyes forward. The stage came back into view. The brass band was tuning instruments. Students fixed their caps. He saw Caleb, straight posture, folded hands, eyes scanning the crowd. And for all the noise around him, Darnell felt only one thing: stillness. And in that stillness, he waited. Not for approval, not for permission, but for the singular moment he had come to see. "Sir," the other guard said again, now more tense, "we're asking respectfully, don't make this more complicated." Darnell looked at him, slow, deliberate. Respectfully would have been offering me a bottle of water and thanking me for showing up. But here we are. More heads had turned. Some folks were watching openly, others pretending not to. A dad in a Dodgers cap 2 rows ahead tilted his head just enough to listen. Then, "Excuse me." The voice came from behind Darnell. Firm, clear, different. The guards turned. A man was standing at the top of the bleachers. Charcoal gray button-up, sleeves rolled, jeans, clean-shaven, square jaw. No uniform, but something about him said pay attention. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, stepping down slowly. Langston frowned. "Sir, we're handling a situation. Please stay seated." The man ignored that. His steps were careful, but not hesitant. As he got closer, the ink down his forearm came into view. Military-style tattoos, faded with time. A few people moved aside, like they knew. He reached Darnell's row and stopped. "Darnell?" Darnell looked over and broke into a slow, surprised smile. "Eli Mendoza," he said. "I'll be damned." Eli nodded and turned to the guards. "This man served with me. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Ramadi, 07. Langston blinked. "Okay, well, this doesn't really concern—" "It does now," Eli interrupted. Langston glanced at the other guard, uncertain. "Sir, we're under instruction to avoid uniform guest drawing." "You think he put that uniform on for you?" Eli asked, voice colder now. "He didn't walk in here to be seen. He walked in because his son's graduating. Same as everyone else." Another man stood, 3 rows down. Stocky, building black shirt, sharp beard. "You said Ramadi?" he asked Eli. Eli didn't even turn. 07, then Fallujah." The man nodded. "We ran recon outside Fallujah. SEAL Team 4. Then another man stood, then another. One in a tan jacket, one in a baseball cap, one who looked like he hadn't shaved in a week, all spread throughout the stands. 6 men, quiet, present, watching. Eli didn't say a word. Neither did they. They didn't have to. Langston's mouth opened, then closed. His partner stepped back instinctively, suddenly aware this wasn't the scene he thought he was managing. "These men," Eli said, looking the guards dead in the eye, "didn't come here for a fight. They came here to support a brother. That's it. You came here with assumptions. Now you're outnumbered in ways you don't even understand." Nobody clapped. Nobody shouted. But the air changed. Eli turned back to Darnell. "We good?" Darnell nodded, voice low. "We're good." The guards still hadn't moved, frozen in place, waiting for a miracle of clarity. Then a woman from the crowd stood, floral blouse, glasses, 4th row. She raised her voice just enough. "Let him watch his son graduate." A few murmured in agreement. Then more, like a wave, soft but undeniable. Langston looked around, finally took a step back. "Okay," he said stiffly. "We'll notify admin. Enjoy the ceremony." They walked off, not defeated, just realizing they were never in control. But not everyone was ready to let it slide. The school principal was walking down from the stage now. Tight face, decision to make. Darnell adjusted his gloves. Slow, precise, heartbeat up, face unreadable. One of the first things they taught in basic: hold your ground without raising your voice. Let other people flinch first. Eli had taken a seat behind him. The other SEALs returned to their spots, quiet watchmen. The tension thinned, but didn't disappear. Then came the sound of heels on metal steps. Dr. Meredith Fulton, principal of Roosevelt High, approached. Black slacks, arms swinging slightly with purpose. She looked like she was hoping this would resolve itself before she got there. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, polite but brisk. "Can I speak with you both for just a moment?" Eli opened his mouth, but Darnell raised a hand gently and stood. "I'm listening," he said. Dr. Fulton glanced at the remaining security staff awkwardly off to the side, then back to Darnell. "We've had a couple of concerns," she began. "Some guests felt the uniform might be a bit much, that it could distract from the ceremony. I want to make sure everyone's comfortable." "Let me stop you right there," Darnell said. "Not rude, but sharp, clean. I served 20 years. I wore this uniform to funerals, to retirements, to promotions. Today I wear it to watch my son become a man. I didn't bring a flag, didn't bring a banner, didn't stand on a chair. I came early, found my seat, and sat down." Dr. Fulton blinked. Her mouth opened like she had a rebuttal. Then, nothing. Eli stood too. "I've worn that same uniform. So have 5 others in this crowd. None of us asked for attention. We came to honor a man who deserves to sit here like any other father." Silence stretched between them. Darnell looked her in the eye. "Let me ask you something, ma'am. If I showed up in a tracksuit or a hoodie, would we be having this conversation?" Dr. Fulton's expression flickered. "I honestly don't know." "That's the problem," Darnell said quietly. Behind them, someone clapped once. Just one clap, then another, then silence. Not a protest, not a celebration, just acknowledgement. Dr. Fulton looked around, then back at Darnell. "I am sorry this happened," she said softly. "No one should have made you feel unwelcome." Darnell nodded. "Apology accepted, but let's be clear, I was never leaving." She gave a small nod, turned, walked back up the steps, never looked back. Darnell exhaled slowly and sat again. Eli leaned forward. "You handled that better than I would have." Darnell smiled. "Didn't come here to fight." "Funny," Eli said. "Neither did we." They looked toward the stage. A man tapped the mic. Students lined up backstage. Ceremony was about to start. Eli leaned back. "Think he's nervous?" Darnell grinned. "Caleb, that kid's built for pressure, used to solve puzzles upside down just to make it harder. Like father, like son. But before Caleb could walk that stage, there was still one more test of respect, this time from the system it's shaky. And not everyone in the crowd agreed with how things had been handled. Halfway through the roll call, a man stood, far right bleachers, white polo, phone in hand. "This isn't a military event," he barked. "Can we get back to the students?" Murmurs broke out. Darnell didn't flinch, didn't look over, but Eli did. He stood again, calm, deliberate. The man in the polo looked startled. Then Wes Kenny stood, then Rivas, then the 3 others. Chaz Holbrook, Leotron, Omar Staten. 6 men spread out, standing. Not angry, not threatening, just present. The man in the polo sat down without being asked. That was the thing about respect. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just shows up and makes people reconsider. The roll call continued, like nothing had happened. Darnell's gaze never left Caleb, but he felt the silence around him, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was strong, protective. He turned slightly, caught Eli's eye, nodded. Eli nodded back. Nothing else needed to be said. A teenage boy leaned over to his mother. "Who are they?" "They're his brothers," she whispered, "just not by blood." The ceremony rolled on. The sun bore down, but the weight that had filled the air earlier, the judgment, the pushback, was gone, replaced by something steadier. Respect.